Hi again, Mark here from Talkingbass. This past week saw the release of the first in a new series of study piece courses over at the Talkingbass website. This first release is all about the famous Prelude from the cello suite in G major by Bach, which you may have seen me perform on this channel last week. I'll link to that video in the info below. In this course, you'll be coached through the entire piece in much the same way that you would be in one-on-one tuition. Each lesson breaks down a small section of the piece so you can build slowly in simple steps. The course also provides a background to the piece, tips on tone and performance, and an insight into how we can arrange classical cello pieces for electric bass. For each section of the piece, I also present a harmonic analysis so you'll get to learn about the music theory behind the piece and begin to see the melody as working through a complete chord progression rather than just a string of unrelated notes. So today let's take a look at the first 4 bars of the Prelude with a lesson from the new course. If you like the piece and want to continue with these lessons, just follow the link below to see more info on the course. Okay, so for the first section we're going to look at bars 1 to 4, which sounds like this. So obviously I've provided the sheet music and tab as a PDF, so I'm not going to run through every single note here. I'm just going to provide a basic overview of all of this and give you some tips on actually getting over those hurdles. So the best way to see this first section is broken down into 4 separate chords. So we're outlining the chords here, they're broken chords. So we have the first one, then the second, third, and fourth. Now, this first chord is the perfect example of how you might play something one way down in this low register, but very differently, an octave higher up in the higher register. So, in the higher register, how I originally learned it, I used this fingering. So there, I'm playing the G on the E string there, I'm playing the D on the 12th fret of the D string, and then the B and the A there at the 16th and 14th frets on the G string. But down here, those same notes, G, D, B, A, I'm using a completely different fingering. So instead of playing the perfect fifth there, the G and the D like this, instead of using the open D string there, I'm playing the D there at the 5th fret of the A string. Then shifting up to play the B there at the 4th fret of the G string and the A there at the 7th fret of the D string. So very different. In terms of the fingering in the left hand, it's all pretty obvious. I'm using the 1st and 4th fingers for the G and the D, then 1st and 4th for the B and the A, and then coming back down on the 2nd finger for the D. But in the picking hand, things aren't as, let's say, instinctive. So you might want to go for that with the 1st finger starting, index finger. But what happens there when you do that is if you play 1, 2, alternating, you then have to jump up with the 1st finger and then you're coming back on the 2nd finger. So you have 2 options there. You can either make a jump with the 2nd finger or you start with the 2nd finger, and that's how I address this. So I'm starting with the middle finger and alternating. So that makes those notes there up on the top all a lot more straightforward. So we're always playing the G string there with the 2nd finger and the D string there and A string with the 1st finger. That tip alone might help a lot with actually playing this line because, like I say, it's more instinctive to actually start with that 1st finger, just as you would with any kind of perfect 4th interval. For the next chord we have... So we're moving position down slightly, so I'm taking the low G there with the 2nd finger of the fretting hand, then 1st finger, and then the rest of the notes are quite obvious. It's all 1 finger per fret there, 1st finger, then 4th finger, 3rd finger, 4th finger. So that's a lot more straightforward. Again, with the picking hand, I'm starting with that 2nd finger and alternating, and I'm going to use that method of picking throughout all of these chords in this first section. For the next chord, we have... And there's a little bit of a technical hurdle here because when we finish the previous chord, we're playing that E there at the second fret of the D string with the first finger. We're fretting that there. So when we come back down to the G, you're going to be coming down on your second finger. You know, you could jump down with that first finger, but it's just not going to be as smooth. So we're down on that second finger, which means when we play up here on the F sharp, C, B, C, we're going to be using the third and fourth fingers. So it's a little bit odd in terms of the actual fingering, and it's going to probably seem a little bit tricky. So play it once like that, and then you can switch over to the first finger on the G on the second time. So, and for the final chord of the section, we have. So we've got the G octave there. So again, I'm using the second and first fingers for the picking hand, and I'm using the first and fourth fingers there, the fretting hand, which leaves us to just play the B and the A there with the third and first fingers. Then one thing to note is that on the second iteration of that, instead of just playing it round twice, for the final note, we drop down to the F sharp there at the fourth fret of the D string. So you can just joint bar with the third finger there. So just shift the weight or shift the pressure from the G string to the D string. So that's the basic notes there. You want to just practice those notes and just get them under the fingers. Completely out of time, you don't have to worry about it all being metronomically precise. Just get those notes under your fingers at a very slow tempo, as slow as you need to go. Then you can start working on the dynamics and the phrasing. Now, if you were to just learn those notes and pay no attention to dynamics or phrasing or any of that stuff, it would probably sound like this. Which, you know, is okay, but there's a lot more to the piece than that. And it just seems to be this incessant 16th note monotone, you know, set of notes. So what we really need to do is look at the phrasing in there, look at the slurs, and we need to think a little bit more rhythmically in terms of it being slightly more rubato. So when rubato meaning freer. So when you play rubato, you play freely. So you play around with the time a little more. So one thing that you'll notice on these first few bars is that there's a slur marking over the first three notes. And that means that each one of those notes wants to lead into the next. It's very legato. So each of the notes leads in, but then for the remainder of the notes, you want to be slightly more detached. Not staccato, so we don't want that, but they just want to be slightly more detached. Okay? Also, as I mentioned, I'm being slightly rubato with the time, so if you were to be very rubato with the time, it might sound like this. Okay, which is obviously an exaggeration. You don't necessarily want to play it like that, but you can play around with the time just to give it more of that rubato feel. And then, of course, there's dynamics, how hard or soft we play, and I vary this up quite a bit. So if you listen to how I play that first phrase. So I've got this kind of wave going on. And I am exaggerating slightly there with the P, so I'm accenting it quite strongly there. Okay, so that's just an example of how you can play with the dynamics. So I'm trying to give more of a kind of slight swell effect, and that helps with the legato feel as we work up. This is how you add expression to the piece. Obviously, you want to just learn the notes first, you know, just learn them as straight 16ths, but after that, you can start to add more of this expression, and that is what is going to give you more of a personality and character to the piece. All of the different musicians that you'll hear play this will all play it slightly different. You'll be able to tell, you know, Rostropovich from Yo-Yo Ma. You listen to how they play, and it's all these expressive aspects that make the difference. The notes are the notes. You know, like I say, if you were to just play through the notes, they would all sound the same, but it's the expression that makes the difference. So just playing through those first 4 bars with expression, I might have... Another aspect of music that we need to address is the harmony. I'd always advise analysing the harmony of any piece that you learn, because then instead of just learning a string of, notes, you're actually going to be seeing the harmony as you move through it. And that can make it can make it a lot easier to learn a piece, because you can actually see those chords as you move through it. Instead of seeing long streams of individual notes, you're seeing groupings of notes and seeing those shapes. So we're in the key of G major, and for the first chord, we have our chord 1, G major. So G, D, root and 5th there, and then we move up to the B on the top, which is the 3rd. So think of the chord tones in a triad, root, 3rd and 5th. So root, 5th, and then the 3rd on the top, which gives us an open voicing of a G major triad, which if I played up here, sound like this. So there's the chord. Then when we move to the A, that's a little neighbor note. Okay, so this is really good in learning about harmony, because you can see how non-chord tones relate to the chord tone. So when we use non-chord tones, they're going to be as melodic devices working around that chord tone framework. So we've got the G, D, B, A, B. Okay, so it's just moving to that A and back. The point of resolution is going to be the B, because it's in the chord. The A there is going to be a dissonance that wants to lead back. So that's the little melodic device there. It's just a neighbor note function. So, and then we just divide our time up there between the B and the D, which again are chord tones. So chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, non-chord tone, chord tone. The chord of G major. For the second chord, we have a C major over G, which is actually a C major second inversion. So it's a C major with the 5th in the bass. So it keeps that G there as a pedal point. So we've got the G there, the 5th of the chord. Then we move up to the E, which is the 3rd of the chord. So think about the notes of C major, C, E, G. So 5th, 3rd, up to the root note. And then again, we've got this little neighbor note function as we move down to the B and back. Okay, so C major over G. The first 2 chords in terms of the key were chord 1, G major, and then chord 4, the subdominant, C major, but obviously keeping that G down in the bass. So you can hear how the G there has that feeling of suspension. We're just keeping that G running. For the third chord, we've got something slightly different. We've got a D7 over G. Okay, so D7 is chord 5 in the key of G. But again, we're holding that G, so we have. Okay, so there's no D in here. We've just got the F sharp and the C there, the 3rd and the 7th, which are the 2 most important notes in a dominant 7 chord. It's that little tritone in there. And then again, on the C at the top, we've got this little neighbor note, which thematically works with the previous bar. So there's a lot of suspension there, because what we've actually got is a D7 sus. And then finally at the end, we've got the G major again, but instead of playing the D down here, we're just playing the octave G, G, root note, 3rd, and again, we've got the A there, that little non-chord tone, neighbor note function. Okay? So in hearing those chords there, we have G major, C over G, D7 over G, and then back to G. Okay, so you can hear the suspension there on those middle 2 chords. And then resolving back to the G. So, like I said, learning the harmony here can be really, really useful because it gives us some definite shapes and a view of what's going relative to the key. So you can see the chords being outlined, you can see the intervals in there. I can see there that it's the C major over the G. We've then got that D7 and back to the G major. You're seeing groupings of notes rather than individual notes, which means it's less to learn overall. So that's the first 4 bars, and obviously I've prolonged this lesson a bit because I'm introducing some of the concepts that we're going to be looking at. In the subsequent lessons, I'll be a lot quicker to work through some of these things. So get those first 4 chords down. Just work on them, in your own time. Don't worry about rushing it. Don't worry about the dynamics or anything like that. Just get the chords down. Just see what's working in there. See those intervals in there, and then you can start to add the expression.